Welcome to my audit classroom. I'm Sid Bundy, and over the next few minutes, I'll present a concept map that goes over the risk-based audit model. Our story begins with an auditor. I'll call him James. James is a highly skilled professional, an expert in data analysis and communication. His job is to express an opinion about the reliability of his client's financial report. He's a tech-savvy analyst working in the assurance services department of a public accounting firm. Financial statement audits are one of the attestation services provided by independent CPAs. The Auditing Standards Board defines the auditor's role in SAS 137. The codification in AUC Section 200 not only defines the overall objectives of the auditor, but also lays out the ethical requirements for an auditor to be independent and demonstrate professional skepticism, professional judgment, and examine sufficient appropriate evidence to reduce audit risk. A client's management team is responsible for preparing the financial report. When they submit the report to be audited, they're asserting that the story the report tells is complete. The cutoff is to a specific time period. The valuation is appropriately allocated to the correct accounts. That the accounts actually exist and the transactions actually occurred. That all the rights and obligations are attributable to the company, and that the true story can be understood given the classifications and disclosures presented. During the planning phase, James will begin his audit by gaining an understanding of the client. He'll identify significant accounts and transactions and make an initial assessment about materiality. AUC 315 defines the auditor's responsibility to assess the risk of material misstatement through understanding the inherent risk within the client and its environment. This includes the client's internal control. The COSO framework is the foundation for understanding the client's internal control system. This framework acknowledges 5 components that work together to establish a foundation for sound internal control. The 5 components are control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. The concept of materiality is applied by James both in planning and performing the audit, also in evaluating the effect of identified misstatements and informing his opinion. The information gathered about the client, its environment, and the internal controls allows James to assess audit risk. Audit risk is a function of a client's inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. We derive the formula for detection risk from this function, where detection risk is overall audit risk divided by the product of inherent risk and control risk. AUC 300 says that the overall audit strategy and audit plan will be defined during the planning phase based on the auditor's risk assessment. In other words, our calculation of detection risk during the planning phase of an audit determines our audit strategy. James's audit strategy is determined by his assessment of detection risk for specific accounts and transactions. When detection risk is thought to be high, James will perform and rely on internal control testing. When detection risk is thought to be low, his audit plan will include more substantive procedures. Substantive procedures are selected based on the risk for each assertion. We'll discuss the usefulness and application of several of these substantive tests in a later video. Each test is designed to provide assurance about a given assertion by providing audit evidence. AUC 500 charges an auditor with the responsibility to collect evidence that is appropriate, relevant, reliable, and sufficient. Auditors provide reasonable assurance, not a certification. They look at evidence on a test basis. So how much evidence is needed to be sufficient? To answer that question, we turn back to the assessment of detection risk. This risk level will be used to calculate the characteristics of a sample and sample size. James has collected sufficient evidence based on his risk assessment. He can use the evidence to draw a conclusion about whether or not he believes the financial report to be free of material misstatements.